Okay, so this is going to be long. It's a long slideshow. It's going to be a long video. It's just going to be long. But this includes all information for the 2-year course of IB history. Each teacher gets to choose their own path, as you're going to see. We're told to choose a certain amount of topics, choose this, choose that. They give us a lot to choose from, and that means that it'll seem like you have a lot to choose from to answer, but you really don't. You need to stick with a pretty tight path of studying specific topics and knowing them really, really well. And then knowing that when you go in to take the IB exam, they will be on there. Those questions will exist. This is just assessment information. These are how your exams are going to appear, what type, what topics, everything you need to know about each paper that you're going to take, whether you're standard level, and then there's a section for my higher level candidates. So this is how the assessments are going to appear. Paper 1 is source-based, paper 2 are essay, paper 3 are more essays. Each section, whether you SL or you HL, does an internal assessment. Pause this, take a screenshot, whatever you need to do. This is exactly how, and if you are a standard level student, you will be assessed in the different weighting of the grades. As you can see, your external assessments are 75% of your total grade. Your internal assessment is 25%. So your internal assessment needs to be on target. It needs to be tight if you're standard level, because you don't have as many points, within HL, you can do a little worse, but for standard level, you have to be on target. And then you've got to remember that that paper 2 is weighted the highest, and it is the most difficult. They grade that the hardest. I mean, I wish IB would change it, to be honest, and I'll go into a rant on that later. But anyways, you have to be just specific. They're open-ended topics on paper 2 anyways, but still, whew. For higher level kids, you can see your weight, assessment weight is different. You have 80% is your external assessment because you have that added paper 3, which is, 3 essays from Europe. Europe is our topic. And you can see too that you can do a little bit worse on a paper 2. I mean, paper 2 for standard level kids is like 45%. For you, it's just 25%. Your paper 3 is going to be weighted higher. So you need to be, on target on your paper 3 and look at paper 1. I mean, it's a source based and it's 20%. So you have a better chance as an HL candidate. Now, I'm sorry, SL candidates. I'm sure you're like, wow, thanks for telling us now. But if it becomes super necessary, we can talk about that. Anyways, my paper 3, that's a lot, 45 marks. You also do an internal assessment, and it is worth 20% of your grade. I still recommend you do really well on this. Okay, so this can be confusing. Standard level, you would think, oh no, I'm higher level, and I'll go to the other section. But what you don't understand is that all of you sit for the standard level section of the IB exam. All of you do the SL part. Paper 1, paper 2, that's everyone. My higher level then add a paper 3, as you see there. So this next section is for everyone. So all candidates sit for the paper 1 exam, and your topic is the move to global war. This is incredibly important that you go to the proper topic. You want to go to topic 3. Don't answer topic 1, 2. One year I had this kid who thought that they had to answer all the topics, and so she just started with prescribed topic 1 and just started answering really vaguely. She got all the way to like 4 before she ran out of time. She did not score well. Understand that I, as an IB teacher, am giving many topics to choose from. I choose the move to global war because it also coincides, by the way, with wars and warfare and authoritarian regimes, which is your paper 2 topic. So, Move to Global War covers Japanese expansionism 1931 to 1941, but as you know, we went into background, and so we looked at the causes of it, which can help you in a number of ways on both the HL and the SL exam. We also covered German and Italian expansionism from 1932 to 1941. 42, which again can be another topic on other choices on paper 2 and paper 3. This is the exam where time matters. Time is the most important element of this exam. Do not waste a minute of it, and do not finish early. If you finish early, then you need to go back and add to your answer 1, 2, 3, or 4. You will use the entire hour, or I will know. I'm not threatening you because, this is going to be on a public, channel, so I can't really threaten you, but you will use every hour. And you'll do it this way. You'll do 10, 10, 15, 25. Paper 1 is source-based, and so the first 3 questions are skill-based. They're going to ask you to do something, do it, and then there's 1 essay. Here is the assessment model. There will be no surprises. This is how it will be. First question, part A, first question, part B. Number 1 mistake kids make is they spend too much time on the first question. Answer it. You want for 3 marks, you want 3 pieces of evidence. On part B, you want 2 pieces of evidence or 2 pieces of analysis. Move on. Do not spend a long time on here. Do not write a thesis. Do not write an essay. Just answer the question. The second question is related to your internal assessment, and that's they're going to give you a document and they want you to look at the value and the limitations of the origin and the value and the limitations of the purpose and the value and the limitations of the content. Use those terms. Don't be fancy, okay? Your third question is usually going to be your compare and contrast. It'll have 2 documents. It's why you spend 15 minutes on it, rather than what you spend on the first 2 questions, which is 10 minutes each. So on the third question, compare and contrast, do not bring in the other sources, only look at the 2 sources that they ask you about. It's worth 6 marks, so what do you want to do here? You want 3 compare, 3 contrast. Remember, you treat the sources together. You don't do a paragraph on one source and a paragraph on another, and then a third that compares and contrasts. You always want to be like source A and B, compare 3 points. Source A and B, contrast 3 points. You'll get all your marks. Be scientific. Don't be eloquent here. We do not care about any narrative writing in this case. Your fourth question is the essay. And by the way, it bears mentioning, answer these in order. You will know all your documents by the time you go to the essay, and then you'll be able to write the essay. Because this is such a strict timing issue here, you want to move. You want to move quickly, and they are not going to mark you down for not having a legit, written, beautiful essay. Make your argument, do your evidence, do your analysis, write your conclusion. Boom, you're finished. So right here is exactly what they're going to ask you about. You won't know. Look, you won't know if they're going to do Japan or Germany and Italy, and please don't get into that statistical game of, oh, well, they asked this last year. I've told you this before. That doesn't matter. IB does not do that. Like who knows? I bet they just put it in a hat and decide that year what they're going to ask. But anyways, you know exactly what they're going to ask about, though. They're never going to ask outside of this date right here, okay? They're always going to stick with causes, events, or responses. So nothing outside of this material for detailed study will show up. Same goes for Germany and Italy. The best advice I have here is they treat this topic together, so you treat it together when you study for it. Study it in a comparison kind of way. How was Hitler different than Mussolini? And by the way, studying for this and looking at Hitler in Germany also helps you with our topic on authoritarian states, which is Hitler and the rise of Hitler in Nazi Germany. So here is the rubric for a paper 1. As you can, it's by far the nicest one, to be honest, other than the reflection part on the internal assessment. So take a moment. That's how you'll be graded 1 through 9. You want in the at least 4 to 9 region. So for Japan, you really probably want to stay away. It's probably the only topic you want to stay away from, role of the leader. You could argue that the weakness of the Japanese monarchy allowed for the military to take over, but you just have to understand this was a time where the military ruled, and even when they had a split in the military, it's still the military in charge. It's easier to go with like either the instability in China, which by the way, at the same time will help you study for paper two topic wars and warfare, the Chinese Civil War, and for the authoritarian state topic of Chairman Mao. So you could do that. You could do the political instability in Japan, post World War I animosity that Japan had. You know, they didn't like the League of Nations. And then, of course, you can always argue the failure of the League of Nations for both topics, by the way. You can do that with Germany as well as Italy. Knowing that the League of Nations failed is probably very important to study, and it's probably one of the best things that you can study. For Germany and Italy, again, you want to do that post-World War I peace treaty settlements. It affects both of them. I mean, Italy's a part of the Allies, but they don't get what they want. Germany, on the other hand, was defeated, and we know what happens there. You want to know about the Great Depression? Remember, economic problems are your number one thing to argue always. People will sign away their rights every day of the week for economic reasons. When they are scared and can't feed their families, they'll be like, here you go, you can have my right to vote, you can have whatever you want, fix it. Also, you have, oh God, sorry. Also, you have political polarization post World War I between the extreme left and the right. During economic times, this always becomes a big issue, radicalization on both sides. But the problem that we're going to see throughout the early 20th century with the left is they were so divided. I mean, the left included everybody from moderate liberals to socialists to anarchists to communists. So they had very little in common. My advice here is to read each question carefully. Stick to the timing, 10, 10, 15, 25. 1 through 3 are skill-based. Do exactly what they ask you for. Don't try to add anything. Don't try to impress them. Look how each one is marked. If it's worth 3 marks, then you want 3 points. If it's worth 2, 2 points. 6, 6 points. All of that, and stick with your timing. Your fourth question is an essay, but they understand that you are on a constrained time. So you want to be quick. Write your arguable thesis, move straight into your evidence, your analysis. Use every single document, every single one, okay? Don't leave one out, even if it's like a differing perspective. That's great. You can argue, here's a differing perspective. And save time for a proper conclusion, the last 5 minutes. Write up a conclusion that supports your arguable thesis, that restates your information. Do not add any new information in a conclusion, and be done. All candidates sit for the paper two exam. It is the hardest, and for SL, you have got to be on target on this one. You can't mess around. Again, this is where I have beef with IB exams, but they will give you all the world history topics going all the way back. I think like the first one, there's 12 topics, by the way. I think the first one is Richard the Lionheart, which is the 1400s. We don't do that, you know, as IB teachers, we're told to teach two. We choose them. And so my choice is in the 20th century. It also helps again with paper one and as you'll see later, paper three as well. So your topics are wars and warfare in the 20th century and authoritarian states in the 20th century. These questions are open-ended, which I will get to later, but I just want you to know while the questions can be very easy, it is harshly graded. So for your assessment, this is two formal essays. You get 1 hour and 30 minutes. I suggest you spend 5 minutes of planning on each essay. Write your plan at the top. So if you get, you know, writer's block at any time, you can go back to it. As you can see, it is heavily weighted for my SL kids. My SL kids have got to have your paper two down. 45% is a significant amount. And it's why the SL paper in history is harder than the HL. So paper two is essay formally. Again, you have 12 topics. I choose two to teach, and you have to answer from two different topics. So one essay has to be from one topic, another essay has to be from a different one. So IB teachers all over the world choose their topics. And that is why it's so difficult to look up information about HL or SL or any of this information. That's why I'm making these videos, even though they're not like, sophisticated and very video-y. But anyways, I make them because there's limited information and because you need to know specifically what you're doing. So the two topics I chose out of the 12, and by the way, there'll be 2 questions per 12 topics, okay? So there's 2 questions on wars and warfare, and that there are 2 questions on authoritarian states. It's your job to answer one from wars and warfare, one from authoritarian states. So our wars and warfare topic are World War I, Spanish Civil War, and the Chinese Civil War. Oftentimes I give you this open-ended question where they ask you to compare or contrast or analyze 2 different civil wars from 2 different regions. So it's important that you study 2 civil wars from 2 different regions. You can't talk about Spain and Russia, they're in the same region. So that's why we learn about the Chinese Civil War. On the same token, it helps us with our second topic, authoritarian states. We look at Mao in China. Specifically, this topic picks up after the Chinese Civil War. So we're looking at Mao and his rule in China from 1949 to 1976. For Hitler and Nazi Germany, it's a little different. Hitler's, rule ends in 1945 when he supposedly, no, I'm just kidding, when he killed himself. And so we're looking at the same thing that paper one is looking at. So you study paper one and Germany and that rise to fascism, and you're studying Hitler and Nazi Germany. What you want to add to it, and what I'll add to it, of course, is the war. How did Hitler progress during World War II? There's a lot of historical argument over that. So here's the prescribed content based on authoritarian states. As you can see, it's very vague. It's not specific. Your job is to plug in Mao in China and then Hitler in Germany. And then you just look at each one of these factors. And that's how you study for this exam. You want to understand too that we have 2 varying different degrees of men. Mao was on the left, extreme left. Hitler was on the extreme right. It's why I picked those two. They're very easy to contrast, even though they used the same thing. They used propaganda, they used ideology, they used the military, they used charisma, speeches, all of that stuff, severe censorship, mass murder. I mean, I could go on and on and on. So they're very easy to compare. You start studying dictators, which I did like all last week, and all you can think is they're mostly the same. I did listen to this podcast. I'm going to go off on a tangent here, but I listened to this podcast by Paul Preston. He's one of the foremost historians of the Spanish Civil War. And his argument was there were no true fascist leaders in the 20th century, that the only one was Mussolini, that he's the only true fascist, that the others were all authoritarian or totalitarian, but not fascist. I found that argument interesting, but I did not agree with it. I mean, it seemed almost as if all of these leaders, whether they were left or right, were fascist. But that's beside the point. I'm including all the suggested examples of authoritarian states in case you want to add one you're interested, or for your IA you want to cover one of these topics. But we do, again, China and Mao and Hitler in Germany. So again, we plug in the war here for wars and warfare. We study World War I because it's an HL and an SL topic, and it's also our one of 2 examples of a total war in the 20th century. It's also in Europe, and that's where our HL topic is. So that's why we cover that. We also cover the Spanish Civil War and the Chinese Civil War. All of those give us plenty of examples to be able to hit all the prescribed content here. So as you can see, for wars and warfare, we do a lot of it. It's my job not to teach all of these, so don't panic. My job is to teach some of these. And so I chose the Chinese Civil War, I chose the Spanish Civil War, and the First World War. But we also learned some of the other stuff. We learned about the Russo-Japanese War in paper one. We learned about the Second World War for authoritarian states. So as you can see, I give you this example that they give teachers to choose from so that you understand that by studying one thing, you're studying for multiple things. Okay, so here's the mark band for paper two, and as you can see, it is extensive. If you're over the 10 range, you're doing really good. So a lot of our arguments are the same that we're going to see in paper one. For wars and warfare in the 20th century, you want to look at militarism and extreme nationalism that not only are going to lead to World War I, but continue through the 1920s, lead right into the rise of fascism and then World War II. And then one could argue the Cold War, and we're still dealing with it today. Polarization of the left and right, again, still dealing with it today. A role of the leader, that is definitely something you can do in the Spanish Civil War, given that Franco really won that war and then reigned. You could do it in the Chinese Civil War as well. How Mao and his leadership versus Chiang Kai-shek and his leadership. You can always argue the economics in the Great Depression. Again, you don't need me to go into my rant about people and how they will put up with a lot during economic good times, but when bad times hit, suddenly they're very critical of their government, which could lead then back to the polarization of politics in the left and the right. And then lastly, for wars and warfare, the one that we've chosen at least, the weakness of the League of Nations. So for authoritarian states, again, all of the same arguments can be had. Economic factors led to the rise of authoritarian leaders. And these authoritarian leaders, if they spent the 30s militarizing, tended to get out of the Great Depression faster than countries that tried political avenues. You really want to focus on the role of the leaders in an authoritarian state question because all of them are totalitarian rulers. Argue if they're fascist or not, which is a great argument to debate in and to look up. But certainly you cannot argue the role of the leader lacking. So that's your best bet on an authoritarian state question. What methods did they use to maintain power? Also, the failure of the United Nations to stop it. And again, it's the same failure of the League of Nations. And then World War II that led to the continuation of Franco and Mao. Since Spain and China kind of stayed out of World War II, they got to keep their authoritarian regime. So it bears mentioning again, this is the most harshly graded of all the exams. For my standard level kids, you can't mess up here. Don't go to a question we didn't study. Study what I'm telling you to study. Answer those questions and you will do well. Use that formula. Remember, thesis, evidence. Every time you mention evidence, what does that mean? Why is that significant? Which historian supports that evidence? Know that stuff. Know the differing perspectives. Sometimes you get school of thoughts like structuralist versus functionalist, revisionist versus post-revisionist. Make yourself a little chart, understand all of those historical arguments because remember, historians love to argue. They love it even more than scientists. Okay, stay in 20th century Europe. That's where our topics are. Don't try to answer a Richard the Lionheart because you once saw a Crusade movie, okay? Choose from two different topics. If you answer two questions from the same topic, that's 50% off. That's done. You're over. Your exam, you got a 3 if you're lucky. Okay, so choose from two different topics and answer just one question from each one. Go to the end of your exam. Your world history topics are in 20th century. They're usually at the end of the exam. Okay, it's also important to note that by studying for paper two, you're also studying for paper one. I've designed it so that you're kind of, doing that. So make sure you stick with the kind of guide and the train or no trek or whatever. I don't know. Just do what I say, kids. Do what I say. Answer in the 20th century. Do not answer earlier. My goodness. Thank you. So this next section is for my higher level students only. I'm not done with my standard level students. You're going to go to the section labeled internal assessment because you still have to do that. But for my higher level students, we're going to go over those topics now. So for paper three, the region I chose to study is Europe. So as a result, you'll be given just an exam about Europe. Unlike the other exams where you have to go hunting our topic, this one at least IB gets right. You will have a range of questions about European history. I start with the French Revolution, so it's my job to choose three topics. And so let's see what those three topics are. So, unlike a paper two exam where you have to choose from two different topics, in a paper three, you can answer from any topic that you want. Meaning, if you see two French Revolution questions, you can answer both. If you see two Italian-German unification questions, you can answer both. If you see two World War I questions, you can answer both. And by the way, you will see two, two, and two. You know that there's always two questions for all the topics. We study these in depth. And again, if you notice that last one, it's also a paper two and also can have, oh, I don't know where that accent came from, can also help you study causes for a paper one. That's why we choose it. For Italian and German unification, it's important to understand that those two things led to the rise of fascisms in both countries in the 1930s. So they serve as a foundation for understanding the rise of Mussolini. And, for what happens in Germany too, the militarization, the nationalism, all that began in unification. It did not begin with Hitler. So all of these topics, with the exception, I guess, of the French Revolution and Napoleon, build upon your standard level or a standard level exam. I would add for Napoleon, it's my belief that with inbreeding, Napoleon is the number one reason for the failure of monarchies in the 1800s, which culminates in World War I. It's by far your longest exam, 2 hours and 30 minutes. You have to answer three essay questions, and it weights at 35%. So unlike standard level students who have to, be really good on their paper two, for my higher level students, you need to be really good on your paper three. It's worth the most. Your region, by the way, is Europe, but I don't have to worry here because you will only get questions about Europe. So here's your mark band for a paper three. It's very similar to a paper two. So you can screenshot that. That's the rubric that graders will use. So I'm going to breeze through these next slides. Our topic one, the French Revolution and Napoleon. Here is the questions, basically in bulleted points. Follow those and you will do well. Make yourself a study guide, blah, blah, blah. Next one. Here we go, Italian-German unification. I'm going to try to do this without even stopping. But anyways. Um, okay, so they're going to treat this the same. So there'll be one question on Italy, one question on Germany. Understand that the causes, the effects, the nature are all going to be the same. Here's the First World War in Europe. I suggest knowing this war very, very well. It can save you in all different areas. And the good thing about studying this war is understanding the causes and the impact are far more important than being able to go, the Battle of the Bulge or the Battle of that's probably World War II. I'm terrible with my battles, to be honest. It's important to know diplomacy and all of that stuff, the causes of it, versus, going too in depth here into those battles or those facts. So I would add a topic for independent study, and this is my advice, because if you study these, you're an HL candidate, you want a little safety, you want to make sure you're building yourself something there in case, you don't know one of the topics of the three questions or, whatever. Okay. Oh my gosh, I sound just so Italian there. But anyways, you're going to do that. And also I chose different areas that we're already studying when we do paper one and paper two. So we do cover the interwar period when we're looking at paper one. We look at it in Japan, but understand, that's a paper one topic. Here it's Europe. Our history isn't always in Europe on an HL. You want to stay in Europe. Please, on an HL exam, do not go off on China unless you're talking about European states in China. Do you understand? But anyways, you can see how a lot of these topics, Mussolini, paper one topic, Hitler, that's not just a paper one topic, it's a paper two topic, Spain is a paper two topic. So all of this stuff will help you study for a paper two. I almost want to make my standard level kids do this as well. But anyways, it's a good topic to study because it helps, there's an overlap there. So here's a topic you might want to add, especially if your argument for paper one and for paper two is the failure of the League of Nations. If that's your jam, then you study this topic. You look at diplomacy in Europe because, again, it helps you with those other topics. It's a good cushion topic to help you on an HL exam as well. So here are arguments to consider, depending on which topic you choose. Remember, you can choose anything. So you just 3 essay questions from anything in that test that they give you. So for French Revolution, if they ask you anything about causes, just argue class. Just do yourself a favor. Argue class. Have at least 3 Marxist historians on your side and just argue that. That's by far the easiest argument. If you want to argue opposite of that, you want to do the weakness of the monarchy, you can do that as well, but that takes a lot of independent knowledge of Louis the 14th. Again, economic hardship or the American Revolution. Please, though, I hesitate to even say that. Please, please, please don't write an essay on the American Revolution because you took a push in 10th grade. This is an HLIB exam. That will not fly. They will just, oh no. But you could argue the Enlightenment, then plus the American Revolution, is one of the causes of the French Revolution. Okay. For Napoleon, the effects of the French Revolution are kind of like the causes of the rise of Napoleon, the failure of the French Republic, the failure of the Directory in the years before 1799, and then foreign wars. I mean, when France won wars, they were okay. When France lost wars, suddenly people were beheading each other and all that kind of stuff. For Italian and German unification, the Napoleonic Wars put nationalism in the forefront in both these areas. I think both of these came away from the Napoleonic Wars understanding that failure to unify was a problem, that there were going to continue to be 30 states in Germany, which before that had been 300, and 9 states in Italy. They would not be able to stop somebody like from Napoleon from invading. So it kind of starts unification. Also, you get a whole bunch of weak leaders throughout that whole region. I mean, the guy in Bavaria is kind of crazy, and the king in Naples is a little off his rocker, and there's a whole bunch of inbreeding and insanity, and it just gets really bad, and they don't really have anything to do with the people. And this is the time for the common people. Also, new ideology was being spread about. This is the century of the isms. And so you get all this like revolutionary ideology. It's like, hey, maybe we should all be equal, or, hey, maybe everybody should have a say in government. Maybe we should be represented. All of that happens. And then you also have that conservative reaction, right? It becomes super radical. Like in Piedmont in 1815, the king just starts ripping up gaslighting and roads, like, improvements that Napoleon had done. He's like, nope, gone. I think this is a good example of what happens when old people continue to rule too, because, during the Napoleonic time, a lot of these rulers lost their throne. The King of Portugal goes to Brazil and all of this, and they aged during that time. And then they come back in 1815, and they're not exactly, big on new ideas, okay? Our last argument, or our last topic is the First World War. This is so well written about. If I have to give you an argument, I don't even know what you're doing with your life. Alliance system, militarization. Do not forget to argue colonization. You will win big points by arguing that actually it was colonization that first, did. It's not a traditional argument, right? The traditional argument is some immigrant somebody made up that you're supposed to memorize an AP or APUS or whatnot. We're not going to do that. We're going to add new ones. There's an element of a race for colonies starting in 1890 that's going to culminate in war. So you also have the weakness of the leaders, specifically on the side of Austria, and radical nationalism, the press, new technology. I mean, they had all these new weapons they wanted to try out. And then least we forget propaganda. So advice, okay. I mean, there's not a lot to say that I haven't already said. You're going to answer 3 essay questions from any topic. Yes, that means you can answer 2 questions about Italian unification. These are essays. You want them to follow that, that formula that I've been drilling into your head. I super, super, that's 3 supers. I recommend that you spend 5 minutes per essay planning it. No, your, basically what your argument is, your evidence, whatever you need to do, your conclusion. And, write a solid essay. Don't just start regurgitating facts for an educated audience. Never forget your grader is educated. They know all this stuff. Assume you are writing an essay for a highly educated person, not your, fifth grade brother or sister. You're going to want to know historical interpretations over time, different perspectives, and foremost historians. That's what you should study. That's what you should be cramming in your head. Okay? All right. So your internal assessment is a pretty big deal. It's 20 to 25% of your grade, and I've got a lot of advice on this, a lot of years of experience. Understand, I am ultimately the first round of grading for your internal assessment. So I grade your first round, and then IB, given whatever year they decide, will either ask me to upload all of them or a sample. It just wait and see. You never know with IB. So your internal assessment is a pretty big deal. You control it. It's the only thing you control. All candidates turn this in. For SL, it's 25%, and for HL, it's 20. This is a study of your choice, but I highly suggest you choose something in the topics mentioned in the first 35 minutes of this infernally long video. So here you go, another screenshot. You're going to kind of stick with this allotted word limit. This is a very strict thing. Whoever is grading has to stop grading once you reach 2,200 words. Some of the things that don't apply, like your bibliography, doesn't apply to the total word count. Neither does your title page, or if you do, like subtitles, none of that counts. But you kind of need to stick within this 500 for the part A, 1,300 for part B, 400 for part C. So part A, here's your rubric. Take a moment, take a look at it. This is where, part A is the easiest place to get your points because it's just so skill based and they want a specific thing. So if you do exactly what that 5 to 6 range is, you'll get a 5 to 6. This is the essay portion, and I always suggest you write your thesis and move back and you blank. Don't even make it a fancy thesis, please. Just make an argument, go right into your evidence and analysis. That 13 to 15 range is rare. I don't see a lot of kids hit that range. The most common one is 7 to 12, and if you get somewhere between a 7 and a 12, you are doing great. Especially if you do really well on part A and really well on part C, which are skill based and they should be perfect, then part, B, you can get a 7 on and still score incredibly well on the internal assessment. Okay, these need to be cited, they need to be clear. You have to have analysis, you have to have a differing opinion. Without a differing opinion, you're in that 4 to 6 range. Look at this rubric very carefully because as you can see, if you can just hit a few things, you will get the higher scoring IA. Nowhere on here does it say, and it is prettily written. Is that even a word? I sound so like, now I sound from Oklahoma. Nowhere on here on this rubric was like, great narrative writing. So, just follow the mark bands. By the way, in IB, a mark band is a rubric. So there's no reason why you shouldn't get a 3 to 4 on a criterion C. I've had you writing reflections all year. This is important to understand. Go to that 3 to 4 area on this mark band and make sure you hit all of that. There's a set of questions I'm going to show you in a little bit. You do not want to answer all of them. This has to be within 400 points, and it always makes me sad. Some years I have to give a 1 to 2 on this easiest part of an IA because they just sit there and go, well, I found it hard to study this. Well, then why did you choose the topic? This is not about your studies. This isn't about your struggles. This is about historians. So this is that part where you do historiography of your topic. Okay, so the next few slides are just going to be reflection questions that IB gives. They are certainly not telling you to use all of them, but use it as a guide. Maybe it can help. What is, helps you write your reflection use. You've got to hit some of these questions or your reflection's not going to score well. but certainly do not answer all of them. I mean, there's like, I don't know how many, a lot. Okay, so there are 19 questions. You don't have time to answer 19 questions in 400 words. I would say, though, you want to know the role of the historian. You want to know the argument of your topic. Please don't be general, too. These are general questions meant for you to take and plug in your topic. So don't just go on some rant about the study of history is biased. It belongs to the victors. Don't start quoting Napoleon or Winston Churchill, right? Like all histories are lies agreed upon. We get that. What this has to be is about your topic, what you chose to write about. If you chose to write about the rise of Adolf Hitler, I'm sorry you spent 20 hours of your life on that. But then make sure your reflection C is about the rise of Hitler. Do you see? So that's a very common mistake. I get these little like podcast like rants about history and the study of it. Look, I get it. It's hard. There are too many different perspectives and too much. It's just too much. But that's not it. You want to be specific. Be specific. I feel like cheerleading. So, as we're ending, a lot of the advice I've given you in the different parts, okay? This is the only part of the assessment you control, so control it. You can do well on this. You don't know what they're going to ask you on anything else, but you do know this. First of all, some good writing techniques. We do not write in first person ever. I, as your grader, know it's you, so I don't need you to write, I think, especially in your reflection. You're going to be tempted, but no, don't do it. No first person. Also, history is always written in the past tense. Always. It's always written in the past tense. It's history. Guess where that takes place? In the past. So write in the past tense. Graders do not care if you write well. They look for argument, evidence cited, analysis, differing perspective mentioned at least once, but I'd mention it more, historical interpretation, awareness of historians and their various arguments, and a solid conclusion that answers the thesis. That is what they are looking for. On your part A, your first paragraph, you have to have your RQ in there. I believe it or not, it's in the rubric. If you don't state your RQ in that first paragraph, okay, I have to take 2 points off. So it's important. Your RQ is right there. Why is this an important thing to study? Don't waste your word count on this area, okay? Go straight into analyzing the heck out of your 2 most important sources. Do them one at a time. So do your first source. So you go, my first important source, and then go straight into analyzing the heck out of it. You're always looking at the value and limitations of the origin, the value limitations of the purpose, the value limitations of the content. That's incredibly important, and you do this twice in your IA, which is an entire section, and on a paper 1 exam question 3. Okay, so you want to look for historical arguments. Historians, again, like to argue. Here I say almost as much as scientists. I would argue more than scientists, but anyways. Part B, no intro. Just go into it. You can state your main argument again, but move right into your essay. Every paragraph should have an argument. Just move right into it. There's no need to do an introduction paragraph. Those are just annoying. And your part A is your introductive paragraph, okay? Any evidence you mention should be followed by analysis, and both. If you get that analysis from somebody else, you want to quote Paul Preston or somebody like that, some big name historian, fine. Summarize what he says. We do not like quotes. Big quotes are terrible, and quotes without analysis after, unacceptable. We don't do that. Never ever do we use a quote to replace our own analysis. This is our paper, our investigation. That's why it's called a historical investigation and not an essay regurgitation of different historical thoughts. Okay, so keep that in mind. Oh my gosh, it's so rude. I'm sorry. It's just this is really important. Okay, no big quotes. It drives me crazy. Can you tell? We also cite everything. We use Chicago Manual style, which means you're going to use footnotes, okay? And you cite anything that is not common knowledge. It does not look bad to oversight, but neither do you want to cite simple things that are common knowledge, like World War I started in 1914. Well, yeah, maybe not everybody knows that. it's common enough knowledge, okay? It's simple knowledge. We don't have to cite that. Okay, more advice on the next slide. I'm going to be quick here. Again, I've already gone over part C. The most common mistake here is students talk about their struggle, studying their topic instead of historians studying the topic, or they go off on moralistic rants about something. So for example, studying Hitler would be difficult given the, I'll let you go ahead and read that. It's just see the difference there. Okay. The point system is clear in this area. 4 points for 4 things they ask. Okay. Also, bibliography, use Chicago Manual style where there are no points awarded here. I require it, so do it. Okay, that's it. I mean, it's a very long video, and I'm very sorry. But again, this covers 2 years of instruction. This is my advice over a 21-year period of teaching IB history. I hope that you enjoy listening to me most beg you to do well on this exam. Like, I'm begging you. I also did this all by myself. Yay, me.